the aim of all his endeavours, aggrandizement the mark at which he for ever shot. In open ambition or close intrigue, his end was the same, to attain the first station in his own country. This account filled me with curiosity. The events that in succession followed his return to England gave me keener feelings. Among his other advantages, Lord Raymond was supremely handsome. Every one admired him. Of women he was the idol. He was courteous, honey-tongued, an adept in fascinating arts. What could not this man achieve in the busy English world? Change succeeded to change. The entire history did not reach me, for Adrian had ceased to write, and Perdita was a laconic correspondent. The rumour went that Adrian had become, how write the fatal word, mad; that Lord Raymond was the favourite of the ex-queen, her daughter's destined husband; nay, more, that this aspiring noble revived the claim of the House of Windsor to the crown, and that, on the event of Adrian's incurable disorder and his marriage with the sister, the brow of the ambitious Raymond might be encircled with the magic ring of regality. Such a tale filled the trumpet of many-voiced fame. Such a tale rendered my longer stay at Vienna, away from the friend of my youth, intolerable. Now I must fulfil my vow, now range myself at his side, and be his ally and support till death. Farewell to courtly pleasure, to politic intrigue, to the maze of passion and folly. All hail England! Native England, receive thy child! Thou art the scene of all my hopes, the mighty theatre on which is acted the only drama that can, heart and soul, bear me along with it in its development. A voice most irresistible, a power omnipotent, drew me thither. After an absence of 2 years, I landed on its shores, not daring to make any inquiries, fearful of every remark. My first visit would be to my sister, who inhabited a little cottage, a part of Adrian's gift, on the borders of Windsor Forest. From her I should learn the truth concerning our protector. I should hear why she had withdrawn from the protection of Princess Evadne, and be instructed as to the influence which this overtopping and towering Raymond exercised over the fortunes of my friend. I had never before been in the neighbourhood of Windsor. The fertility and beauty of the country around now struck me with admiration, which increased as I approached the antique wood. The ruins of majestic oaks, which had grown, flourished, and decayed during the progress of centuries, marked where the limits of the forest once reached, while the shattered palings and neglected underwood shewed that this part was deserted for the younger plantations, which owed their birth to the beginning of the 19th century, and now stood in the pride of maturity. Perdita's humble dwelling was situated on the skirts of the most ancient portion. Before it was stretched Bishopgate Heath, which towards the east appeared interminable, and was bounded to the west by Chapel Wood and the grove of Virginia Water. Beyond, the cottage was shadowed by the venerable fathers of the forest, under which the deer came to graze, and which for the most part, hollow and decayed, formed fantastic groups, which contrasted with the regular beauty of the younger trees. These, the offspring of a later period, stood erect and seemed ready to advance fearlessly into coming time, while those outworn stragglers, blasted and broke, clung to each other, their weak boughs sighing as the wind buffeted them, a weather-beaten crew. A light railing surrounded the garden of the cottage, which, low-roofed, seemed to submit to the majesty of nature, and cower amidst the venerable remains of forgotten time. Flowers, the children of the spring, adorned her garden and casements. In the midst of lowliness there was an air of elegance which spoke the graceful taste of the inmate. With a beating heart I entered the enclosure. As I stood at the entrance I heard her voice, melodious as it had ever been, which before I saw her assured me of her welfare. A moment more and Perdita appeared. She stood before me in the fresh bloom of youthful womanhood, different from, and yet the same, as the mountain girl I had left. Her eyes could not be deeper than they were in childhood, nor her countenance more expressive, but the expression was changed and improved. Intelligence sat on her brow. When she smiled her face was embellished by the softest sensibility, and her low, modulated voice seemed tuned by love. Her person was formed in the most feminine proportions. She was not tall, but her mountain life had given freedom to her motions, so that her light step scarce made her footfall heard as she tripped across the hall to meet me. When we had parted, I had clasped her to my bosom with unrestrained warmth. We met again, and new feelings were awakened, when each beheld the other, childhood past, as full-grown actors on this changeful scene. The pause was but for a moment. The flood of association and natural feeling which had been checked again rushed in full tide upon our hearts, and with tenderest emotion we were swiftly locked in each other's embrace. This burst of passionate feeling over, with calm thoughts we sat together, talking of the past and present. I alluded to the coldness of her letters, but the few minutes we had spent together sufficiently explained the origin of this. New feelings had arisen within her, which she was unable to express in writing to one whom she had only known in childhood. But we saw each other again, and our intimacy was renewed as if nothing had intervened to check it. I detailed the incidents of my sojourn abroad, and then questioned her as to the changes that had taken place at home, the causes of Adrian's absence, and her secluded life. The tears that suffused my sister's eyes when I mentioned our friend, and her heightened colour seemed to vouch for the truth of the reports that had reached me. But their import was too terrible for me to give instant credit to my suspicion. Was there indeed anarchy in the sublime universe of Adrian's thoughts? Did madness scatter the well-appointed legions, and was he no longer the lord of his own soul? Beloved friend, this ill world was no clime for your gentle spirit. You delivered up its governance to false humanity, which stripped it of its leaves ere winter time, and laid bare its quivering life to the evil ministration of roughest winds. Have those gentle eyes, those channels of the soul, lost their meaning, or do they only in their glare disclose the horrible tale of its aberrations? Does that voice no longer discourse excellent music? Horrible, most horrible! I veil my eyes in terror of the change, and gushing tears bear witness to my sympathy for this unimaginable ruin. In obedience to my request, Perdita detailed the melancholy circumstances that led to this event. The frank and unsuspicious mind of Adrian, gifted as it was by every natural grace, endowed with transcendent powers of intellect, unblemished by the shadow of defect, unless his dreadless independence of thought was to be construed into one, was devoted, even as a victim to sacrifice, to his love for Evadne. He entrusted to her keeping the treasures of his soul, his aspirations after excellence, and his plans for the improvement of mankind. As manhood dawned upon him, his schemes and theories, far from being changed by personal and prudential motives, acquired new strength from the powers he felt arise within him, and his love for Evadne became deep-rooted, as he each day became more certain that the path he pursued was full of difficulty, and that he must seek his reward not in the applause or gratitude of his fellow creatures, hardly in the success of his plans, but in the approbation of his own heart, and in her love and sympathy, which was to lighten every toil and recompense every sacrifice. In solitude, and through many wanderings afar from the haunts of men, he matured his views for the reform of the English government, and the improvement of the people. It would have been well if he had concealed his sentiments until he had come into possession of the power which would secure their practical development. But he was impatient of the years that must intervene. He was frank of heart and fearless. He gave not only a brief denial to his mother's schemes, but published his intention of using his influence to diminish the power of the aristocracy, to effect a greater equalization of wealth and privilege, and to introduce a perfect system of republican government into England. At first his mother treated his theories as the wild ravings of inexperience, but they were so systematically arranged, and his arguments so well supported, that though still in appearance incredulous, she began to fear him. She tried to reason with him, and finding him inflexible, learned to hate him. Strange to say, this feeling was infectious. His enthusiasm for good which did not exist, his contempt for the sacredness of authority, his ardour and imprudence were all at the antipodes of the usual routine of life. The worldly feared him, the young and inexperienced did not understand the lofty severity of his moral views, and disliked him as a being different from themselves. Evadne entered but coldly into his systems. She thought he did well to assert his own will, but she wished that will to have been more intelligible to the multitude. She had none of the spirit of a martyr, and did not incline to share the shame and defeat of a fallen patriot. She was aware of the purity of his motives, the generosity of his disposition, his true and ardent attachment to her, and she entertained a great affection for him. He repaid this spirit of kindness with the fondest gratitude, and made her the treasure-house of all his hopes. At this time Lord Raymond returned from Greece. No two persons could be more opposite than Adrian and he. With all the incongruities of his character, Raymond was emphatically a man of the world. His passions were violent. As these often obtained the mastery over him, he could not always square his conduct to the obvious line of self-interest, but self-gratification at least was the paramount object with him. He looked on the structure of society as but a part of the machinery which supported the web on which his life was